I apologize for my unattractive wife. The words hung in the air like a jagged knife as my mother-in-law suddenly snatched the microphone from her husband, silencing his heartfelt speech. Her voice was sharp, her tone cutting through the joyful chatter. From now on, I'll discipline her properly, at least to make her a better wife on the inside. Her smug satisfaction stood in stark contrast to the stunned silence that enveloped the room. I froze, my mind reeling, and instinctively turned to my husband for support. What I saw instead chilled me to the bone. Stephen's smirk, a disturbing curve of his lips, sent a shiver down my spine. My body trembled. My thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm. Then, amidst the oppressive quiet, the purposeful scrape of a chair against the floor broke the moment. An older man rose to his feet, his commanding presence drawing all eyes to him. "Is that all you wanted to say?" he asked, his voice carrying an edge that demanded attention. Without waiting for a response, he strode toward me, unbothered by the collective gasp that rippled through the room. Stephen's smirk faltered, his eyes widening in disbelief as the man ignored him entirely. Instead, the stranger reached for my hand. "Let's get out of here," he said firmly. Before I could process what was happening, he guided me away from the chaos, my wedding dress dragging along the polished floor like a symbol of all the burdens I carried. As we exited the reception hall, leaving whispers and confusion in our wake, my thoughts raced. Who was this man? Why had he come to my rescue? My name is Angela. I'm 35 years old, and my life has never been simple. Growing up in a single-parent household, I learned resilience early. My parents divorced when I was in elementary school, and from that point on, it was just me and my mom. She fell ill during my 20s, and I juggled a full-time job with caregiving, putting my own life on hold. By my 30s, I was still single, my world revolving around work and my mother. When Stephen entered my life, it felt like fate. He was kind, understanding, and supportive, qualities I hadn't dared to hope for. Stephen proposed after a year of dating, fully aware of my responsibilities to my mother. "Why don't we become a family of 3?" he had said, his words melting my reservations. It seemed like the perfect solution, and for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. But that hope quickly dimmed when I met his mother, Ruth. From the moment Stephen and I announced our engagement, Ruth made her disdain for me abundantly clear. "A woman from a single-parent family is not a worthy wife," she declared, her words laced with venom. Every encounter with her during wedding preparations became a battle. She criticized everything about me, my past, my choices, even my appearance. An old hag past her prime, with a sick mother to boot, she sneered. Her insults cut deep, but the worst was when she insulted my mom. Choosing my wedding dress should have been a joyful milestone, but Ruth turned it into another point of contention. She insisted on picking the dress herself, dragging Stephen into the argument. "Mom has great taste. She'll choose something perfect," he assured me, always quick to side with her. "I appreciate your help," I replied, forcing a smile, "but this is a once-in-a-lifetime moment for me. I'd like to choose my own dress." My firmness didn't sit well with Ruth. She backed off but harbored a grudge that came to fruition on my wedding day. As I stood in the hotel dressing room, admiring the veil my mother had lovingly handmade, Ruth stormed in. Her expression twisted with disdain as she took in my attire. "What an awful dress! You'd look better wearing a garbage bag," she spat before reaching into her bag and splashing coffee all over the fabric. "Stop it! What are you doing?" I shouted, horrified as the rich brown liquid stained my gown. Ruth crossed her arms, smug. "This is what happens when you don't listen to me. Wear the dress I chose, or you'll ruin the wedding." Tears blurred my vision as I hurried to Stephen, desperate for comfort. But his response shattered what little strength I had left. "What do you expect me to do about it?" "Just wear the other dress," he said, brushing off my distress. It wasn't until the reception, during the family speeches, that Ruth revealed her true cruelty. With the microphone in hand, she proclaimed, raised in a single-parent household, she's an ugly bride with no sense. "But don't worry, I'll discipline her properly." I could no longer hold back my anger. Just as I prepared to confront her, the same man from earlier stood up once more. His gaze pierced Ruth like a blade. "You don't belong here," he said, his voice unwavering. Stephen turned pale, his confidence evaporating in an instant. "Why is the CEO here?" he stammered, panic written all over his face. The man beside me tightened his grip on my hand, guiding me out of the reception hall. My heart pounded as realization dawned. The man who had come to my aid wasn't just anyone, he was my father. Even after the divorce, my parents managed to remain civil, occasionally meeting, and I saw my father a few times each month. He always ensured I had the support I needed, financially and emotionally, until I became an adult. Even when my mother required care, he stepped in to help. Our bond was solid. But despite our closeness, I never asked much about his work. So, imagine my shock when I discovered that my father was the CEO of Stephen's company. A coincidence so surreal it left me speechless. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice sharp with confusion. "You said you had an important business meeting and couldn't make it to my wedding." "My meeting ended earlier than expected," he replied, his tone steady. "I decided to come and at least give you your gift in person." His explanation seemed plausible enough, until he continued. "At the entrance, I ran into an employee. They mentioned the names of the bride and groom to prepare the gift, and that's when I realized it was your wedding. There happened to be a last-minute cancellation, so I took the open seat." "Why didn't you tell me?" I pressed. "Your mother and I thought it'd be a nice surprise," he said, a faint sadness clouding his expression. "I never imagined things would take this turn." Before I could respond, the dressing room door swung open. My mother-in-law entered, her voice suddenly syrupy sweet, so unlike her usual tone that it sent shivers down my spine. "Angela, you can't just run off like that," she cooed. The act was so transparently false it made my skin crawl. Clearly, she had just learned who my father was. "Who do you think is responsible for all this?" my father asked her, his voice cutting like steel. "That was just a little joke," she said, trying to laugh it off. "A joke?" My father's voice sharpened. "You made a vulgar joke at my daughter's expense on her wedding day? That's unforgivable." No, it wasn't like that," she stammered, panic flashing in her eyes. "I wasn't serious." "Oh? So you're saying you genuinely called my daughter ugly?" My father's words hit like a thunderclap, leaving her stumbling for a response. Just then, Stephen burst into the room, his footsteps heavy with urgency. Without hesitation, he threw himself to the floor before my father. "I deeply apologize for my mother's behavior," he said, his voice trembling. "You're apologizing to the wrong person," my father snapped, his cold gaze piercing through my so-called husband. "Angela, I'm sorry." Stephen turned to me. "It was all my mom's doing." "Then why didn't you stop her when she insulted me?" I demanded. "You just sat there, grinning like nothing was wrong." I was in shock," he stammered. "And besides, my dad tried to intervene." "Oh, so it's just my imagination that you looked so comfortable sitting there?" I countered, my anger surging. "This is all my mom's fault." Stephen yelled, pointing an accusatory finger at his mother. "Stephen! Are you betraying your mama?" she shrieked, her voice shrill with desperation. "Didn't we agree to discipline this cheeky wife together?" "Hey! Don't say unnecessary things." Stephen barked, clamping a hand over her mouth in a futile attempt to silence her. "So, care to explain what's really going on?" my father demanded, his voice unyielding. Stephen began to falter, his words stumbling over one another. "My mom thought Angela needed discipline. She said if Angela chose her own wedding dress, she'd become a rebellious wife." "What's wrong with choosing my own dress?" I asked, incredulous. Stephen's reply came as a confession, his tone bitter and twisted. "A wife should listen to her mother-in-law. If she can't even do that, she'll never listen to her husband. I thought marrying you would be convenient. You've got savings, and I planned to use that to build a house for my mom and me. But now it's all ruined. The truth spilled from his lips, ugly and unfiltered. Each word was a dagger, revealing that his promises of love and care were nothing more than lies. You plan to use me, I said, disgust evident in my tone. Realizing his mistake, Stephen backtracked frantically. No, no! That's not what I meant. Please, Angela, let's not ruin everything. It's over, I said firmly. You don't want a wife. You want a servant. But the wedding's today, he protested. What will we tell the guests? I'll apologize to them myself, I said coldly. And since your family caused this fiasco, you'll cover the costs. This is absurd, he shouted. It's your fault for making such a fuss. I pulled out my phone, calm but resolute. Let me remind you of all the things your mother has said. I pressed play. The recording filled the room with her venomous insults. Poor, ugly, harsh woman. Her face turned ghostly pale. I was just trying to discipline my daughter-in-law, she cried. I didn't do anything wrong. Save it for the judge, I said. My father delivered the final blow. I'll be reconsidering your position at the company. His tone left no room for negotiation. Stephen and his mother collapsed into desperate pleading, but it was too late. I walked out, leaving them to their disgrace. In the end, they paid for the wedding, and I pursued damages for emotional distress. My ex-husband was demoted and ostracized. His mother, divorced and disgraced, was cast out by her own family. As for me, I'm thriving, surrounded by love and freedom. My parents and I, stronger than ever, occasionally gather for dinners filled with warmth and laughter. Life is brighter without their shadows.